I just got a visual of how that would actually look in an immersive way on the battlefield, that you're sitting there just slashing at the enemy, making it bleed, and it's just spurting blood out, and you're like, here we go. So let me get I got my handy dandy notepad here. Okay. Now, I've populated these two. If you guys don't know already, we already know two of the schools for the cleric, and that is supposed to be life and death. Okay. So if we go and look at the cleric for example here, there's lots of different ways to navigate around this, I feel, but class of cleric is able to choose between life or death augments. Choosing life augments will provide self-healing benefits as well as limited life-giving ability benefits to other players. Some cleric augments applied to certain skills will indirectly provide the ability to heal others. These will not replace the need for a cleric archetype. So the heals are not going to be so strong that you don't need to bring a dedicated healer into your group. But they can be very supplemental and advantageous to have, especially in PvP, whether that's open world PvP, caravan stuff that's more on a whim and not really organized. Or in small format where you might just not have room for a cleric, such as or the arenas. I can very much see cleric secondaries doing very well in there because of their ability to sustain. Cleric augments will radically change the type of summons available from the summoner primary archetype. Radically change. I'm excited to know what radically change means to Intrepid on this one. Skeletons, zombies, and other undead summons will be possible with death-based augments. I hope you can summon a horde of zombies or skeletons. Like just 15 of them, 20 of them or more at a time. They don't need to do a ton of damage. I don't care if they all do 1 damage each per hit, but I want there to be an army of it to make it feel that much more epic and just give that your opponent that feeling of being completely overwhelmed by the undead. That would be so cool. I might actually roll summoner cleric if that's the case, which is, I don't know what, but well, you pick from those augments to influence their skills to affect the life of others around you. So the way this is worded, and we might need to go and listen to a couple of these citations to get the exact verbiage, because this is often summarized. But the way this is written makes it sound like there's only going to be 2 schools of augment for the cleric. But every class is, or every archetype is supposed to offer 4 schools of augment. So I don't know. I don't know what that means exactly. I don't know how that's going to affect it. Maybe that'll be not, maybe these aren't so much the schools of augment, but this is how the schools are applied. So there could be 4 separate schools, and they are applied either to either a life or death type ability, depending on what that ability does innately. If it's an offensive mechanic, then it might apply death, or you might be able to choose a bit of like a life steal type thing. So from there, if we really want to figure out what the other schools are going to offer and how both the life and death and potentially other schools are going to influence other abilities, we need to understand a little bit more about what the cleric is. So in such a dangerous world, a cleric is never wanting for friends. Have you guys ever played an MMORPG that you weren't always looking for healers for your runs? Healers seem to be even more of a shortage than tanks in most cases that I've seen. They can protect their allies in a number of ways, and when necessary, snuff the life out of others. Masters over the very essence of life, they can sense the broken and corrupted. Which, that makes me wonder, and I'm curious if this will even be a thing, but augments that are maybe a little bit more focused on your out of combat abilities. I don't think we really talked about this much with the tank. Sorry, I'm fucking around with the music volume again here. The only time you notice this cleric is when you die. Yeah, and then it's the cleric's fault, right? 100%. Oh, I'm sorry. You couldn't heal me while I stood here in this pool of poison rather than move out of the way. It's totally the healer's fault. It's the healers are so underappreciated and underrespected in games, but they're always demanded. They're always in demand. And that, to me, that blows my mind. That blows my mind. So this makes me wonder now. This makes me think. There could be a possibility that, sensing the broken and corrupted, perhaps this is a way of augmenting passive abilities or out of combat abilities to increase your perception. Keep in mind, this is a Pathfinder based game in the sense that that's where this world stemmed from, with Steven's Pathfinder campaign that he developed over many, many years. I wonder if a possible school of augment will be perception. Enhance your awareness of your surroundings and those you interact with. So ability to detect traps. That is supposed to be a ranger base ability, from my understanding, to detect traps and environmental hazards. Okay. But maybe the cleric's secondary can enhance that a bit. Ability to detect treasures, secrets, like secret passageways, secret rooms. That is supposed to be a rogue primary ability. What about ability to detect... And guys, I'm thinking of this shit just off the top of my head, so please chime in if you've got any thoughts or anything on this. Chime in. This was not preconceived. What about the ability to detect an NPC's true intent or true nature? So if you come up and you have a non-hostile NPC in the world, like let's say you're out exploring a cave, you come up to this NPC and you can interact with them, and you have a choice of to help this person or not. Maybe the cleric can give you a perception, or if you're augmented from the cleric, get a little bit of extra perception, so you can start to see, is this player or is this NPC corrupt? Are they a corrupt? Are they part like in league with the ancients, or are they true to their intent? Are they good-willed? And you can kind of make a more informed decision on how you interact with that NPC moving forward, because maybe that decision has longer lasting effects and could dictate your reputation with local a local village or local towns, local NPCs. It could have an impact on some quest rewards or future quest lines that become available to you. So I could see that being something there as well. I had another thought on that as well. Perception. I don't know if maybe you would loop in like persuasion with that, such as being able to haggle or barter better deals with NPC vendors, perhaps. So I don't know. Those are a few thoughts off the top of my head about what something like that could be. In terms of a fourth school, life we know can offer self-healing through other abilities. So if we were to look at, say, the tank's a charisma stat or similar, I don't know if we will have a charisma stat in the game. We do have stats in the game right now. All of the races do start with the same stats. We could go and look and see. Now the races will seed your starting stats. They will determine your starting stats. Beyond that, your archetype will be the one that grows those stats and influences how they grow or which ones grow quicker than others. Doesn't really look like we have too much information on stats yet. Oh, here we go. So we've got health and mana, of course, power, dexterity, constitution, will, wisdom, and mentality. When we know a little bit about what some of these things might do, but not a lot yet. Mentality could be something along the lines of a charisma, or will, even, I suppose. We'll have to see. It's definitely not exactly the same thing. So I could see that being an influence, but again, in order for it to be a secondary augment, you need to have a primary ability that kind of at least has that interaction. So if you don't have an ability to like just your normal NPC interaction is not a primary ability. It's just a feature. The fact that you have to push a button to talk to someone is simply due to the reason that you cannot just be like, hey, what's up? You got something for me? So if there's no primary ability to interact with that NPC in the first place, then it's likely not going to be a school of augment because it's not going to augment anything. So that being said, maybe this haggle barter is unlikely to happen. Where and leadership with buffs for action economy, defense, etc. for close allies. I think that there's got to be something to do with buffing. I don't know how much the cleric is going to offer for buffs for their level 1 to 10 abilities. That's not really a thing. Buffing, they do have some debuffs that they apply to enemies, so that I could see that potentially being a thing too, though. So something like that. Yeah, let's roll with this. So I like that name. I like that name, leadership. If I can spell it, shouldn't be difficult. So that could provide small buffs to self or allies based on the ability you do, or it could enhance your buffs, enhance the own thing, the buffs that you do yourself, or even so enhance innate buffs and debuffs. I'll do and debuffs. Yeah, definitely the debuff side, because the cleric does offer debuffs, so I can very much see that being a thing where it just, if you're a mage, let's say, and you cast a fireball and it puts a dot on the enemy to burn them over time, perhaps you get a small, it enhances that buff to where, and maybe this ties into the life healing side of it, where whatever damage it takes to do, you absorb as health, or as mana, or as life and death. Maybe one of them is even. I'm going to put a fifth one down here because that's the way it is. But it could be resource manipulation. That could 100% be a school. And that could be super OP, depending on how it's tuned, of course. But the ability to either drain your opponent's resource, so whether that be mana or stamina or energy or rage or whatever the resource is for your class. In the end, right now everybody uses mana, and maybe that's just the way it'll be. It's just mana is going to be the only resource in the game, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine to me. It just makes a lot of things, especially from a consumable standpoint, just simpler. But you could potentially drain your opponent's resources with your abilities, or you could, I don't know about absorb, but grow your own, increase your regeneration. And that, to me, this is outside of the life and death as well. And possibly even absorb your opponents. Enhance innate buffs, debuffs, buff self allies. What else? You thinking it would be kind of proximity based for this as well, for allies potentially. I could see that, especially in the sense of like the tank we suspected last week would offer a lot in terms of defensive buffs, or even like a shield, a barrier that absorbs a certain amount of damage before it breaks. I could see something similar coming from the cleric, but maybe it doesn't absorb damage so much. Then again, I'm going back into the life side of things here with it being like a heal over time type influence. So that's a tough one. I knew the cleric was going to be a tough one. As soon as everybody was like, yeah, do the cleric next, I'm like, all right, here we go. Life and death it's true, they do. And this is why I've had such a tough time, and why I almost wonder if the cleric's going to be an exception to the rule of 4 schools of augment. Or were those just kind of early iterations, and we are going to see those broken down? We might see life and death kind of broken down into 2 separate or 4 separate schools themselves, where all this goes out the window, and this one I'm already this feels like a stretch right here already. That feels like a big stretch to me, but it would be neat. But I could see death being split into 2 things and life being split into 2 things, where, you know, there might be 2 different paths to go down the death side of influencing life in a negative way versus influencing life in a positive way. Man, cold coffee, and not the good kind. Mrs. got busy, so I didn't get my good cold coffee. I ran out of time to make it myself this morning. I life and death overlap everything. That's the trouble here. That's the true trouble. That's the true issue with trying to figure out the cleric and where they're going to apply. So I doubt we're going to see an ability to revive players become a thing. Even under the life school, I doubt we're going to see adding resurrection as an augment to any other ability, unless there's already a resurrection to it. And or a resurrection ability, like say the bard has a resurrection, maybe applying the life augment to it will increase the amount of health that revived player spawns in with. Blessings are better when they're shared, but it creates a chain healing among your allies. And by intentional launch a radiant spear, anytime that foe is attacked, the attacker has a chance to get healed. But again, a life augment. That, you know, anybody, I could see this being a thing where simply when you attack an enemy with XYZ ability, it applies a debuff on the enemy that anytime somebody hits that enemy now, they're getting healed for a small portion of the damage they do, or for a set amount even. Just a direct heal, very powerful direct heal. The light takes away damage. Curses your target, dealing holy damage over time and lowering their damage output. Increasing its power also snares your target and extends its reach to enemies surrounding them. It unleashes a bolt of holy power that rips at your target spirit, channeling damage over time. A divine energy blast damages nearby enemies at the end of the channel. See, abilities like this and divine censure and a few others here do give the cleric some very good damaging abilities early on. And from my experience playing cleric in the Alpha 1 test, and I know things are going to get tuned and changed to a degree, but they are one of the most efficient levelers because they have almost zero downtime. You can just go from one kill to the next kill to the next kill to the next kill. You don't have to stop and wait for regen or sit down to eat. If you're using your skills somewhat efficiently, and you can kill decently fast too. Not quite as quick as others, but that's to be expected. But you can still kill really quickly and easily. You can easily handle things your level or even higher. So here we've got an AoE healing on the ground, and slash, it also damages enemies that happen to be in there. So this is really great to throw into your melee and your tank. Just a straight damage thing here. And again, we do have another debuff here. We had a debuff earlier where it lowered the enemy's damage output, so reducing their attack power or even magical attack power if it's just straight damage output. And here we've got one that reduces their damage mitigation, just makes them take more damage. The way it reads, by lowering damage mitigation, it's not just lowering defense, but it can also lower their block chance, their parry chance, their dodge chance. So they just become a lot easier to hit, a lot easier to kill. And of course, castigation. And this is the kind of crux behind that super efficient leveling class. It damages the enemy, but it also regenerates health and mana for you and allies around you. And it's super strong. The amount of mana you get back right now is not like an insane amount. It's not going to take you from an empty bar to full on one monster. But the cool thing is once you hit the enemy with that, it starts the regen. Even if that enemy dies, that regen still continues for its full duration, which I really like. So, I mean, there it is. That's the cleric's level 1 to 10 abilities. We've got a lot of healing. We've got a decent amount of damage. We've got debuffs on your opponents. We've got resource regeneration for yourself and allies. So I can see that being a big thing. I can see the leadership definitely being a school of augment where you add buffs and debuffs, but maybe not in the same flavor of buffs and debuffs that other classes provide, you know, whereas you can put a debuff on the enemy that lowers its damage output entirely, not just physical. You're not just breaking its attack power or breaking its magic power. You're just putting a damage dampening effect on there. And you know, where one augment might add 10% attack break, this one might add, say, 7% damage reduction. So it's not niche, therefore it's not as powerful, but perhaps they could even stack when you're playing in a group. And now that becomes really, really powerful because now you're taking a lot less damage in general. Now your summoner can use its tank pet, and they've chosen a bunch of life augments on there, so that tank is self-healing, and you've got all these damage mitigation debuffs on your opponent, and boom, you don't even need the guardian tank. They all become moot. Unlikely. But, and I think resource manipulation. I'm going to keep it on the page for now, but I'm going to drop it down here because it seems like I think it's a neat concept, but I also think it's very unlikely to be a reality. I see where these are going a lot more. So we got self-healing through other abilities. We could put debuff on enemy to heal all that hit it. What else could we see? Self-healing through their abilities. Things like Ranger or let's say ranged abilities. Ranged abilities and AoE abilities heal allies in proximity or that they pass through. Full summoner parties could be nuts. Oh, totally. Considering that the summoner is supposed to have access to summons, the three that fill each of the three parts of the Trinity system. So you're supposed to have tank, healer, and damage-based summons. And they are all supposed to be quite viable in their own right. And you can choose to really spend your skill points into those particular summons to enhance them and actually make them really effective at what their role is intended to be, rather than just kind of a meat shield that you throw out to hopefully hold the enemy long enough that you can kill it before it gets to you, kind of thing. So you can have a lot of control and really focus your play style through your summons, and you are actually just there to enhance your summon's ability to perform. So that adds a really cool play style, in my opinion, to it. Recently I've been playing a lot of TBC Classic, well, a little bit of TBC Classic, and I've been playing a Warlock. I've never gone down into the demo tree before in my life, and I've been leveling that way. And it's been neat because now my pet control has become so much more just a part of my natural rotation. Whereas before it'd be like, hey, you just send your pet over there and turn all its abilities on auto and just let it do its thing while I sit here and cast and kill. But no, now I'm actually trying to like make my Felgarden pet do what I need it to do. Like you're there to do a specific role, and that's to keep shit off me. Just try to do it. It can't because I do too much damage, so I pull aggro right away. But it's added a really neat play style to the game. I thought. So yeah, full summoner parties, they will absolutely be able. I think you are going to see full summoner parties be kind of like a meme team that can go in and do raids. They can do dungeons, maybe even world bosses. Like imagine. Don't even imagine, because it's going to happen. You know it's going to happen. There will come a time. It might be 10 years down the road, but there will come a time when you see 40 summoners in one raid group go and take down a world boss. Mark my words, it's going to happen. And it's going to be epic. And if I'm wrong, hey, you'll probably have forgotten about it by then, so. Because who knows? In order for me to be truly wrong, the game has to die and there's no more chance for it to happen, right? How about death? What do you guys think we could see from the death school of augments? We know that the summoner can basically raise an army of the dead. So they can be skeletons, they could be zombies, they could be who knows any other manner of creature that they feel like throwing at us. Also, I realize it's really quiet here. I should throw some background tunes on. But yeah, what else do you think? I can see adding diseases, heal blocks. Of course, these are all going to be like a debuff type thing. What about some abilities even having just a chance to execute? Obviously wouldn't work on bosses. But let's say you come in with your judgment or maybe a lacerate And God, this monitor's too fucking big. And you just, once the enemy's below 30% health, if you hit with that ability, you have like a 2% chance to just immediately kill the enemy. They're just dead. That would be super OP because of the RNG element. And trying to find a number that's reasonable where it feels like the augment was worth taking over, let's say, a lifesteal for that will heal yourself, but a guaranteed effect every time you use the ability, versus something that has a 2% chance to pop off. When it does pop off, it's amazing. And you could be at 1% health, literally one hit away from death. You just got the enemy below that 30% threshold. You pop that ability, the 2% procs, and you kill them. Like, that's wow. That's gonna be the moment that once you collect yourself, you go change your pants and you clip that and you put it up somewhere, right? Like that's going to be that oh my god kind of moment. But what about the other 98% of the time when it doesn't do anything, when nothing happens? It feels like a wasted pick. And not more often than not, that constant sustained lifesteal throughout the duration of that fight is probably going to net you an overall better chance to win. It's going to be more than 2%, that's for sure. So, yeah, I don't know. Chance to execute would be cool, but I don't know about that. Lifesteal? My biggest question about lifesteal, does it go under the life side or does it go under the death side? Don't know. But it could go on either one. But a lifesteal effect absolutely is going to be a thing. It has to be a thing. Whether it's based on the amount of damage you do on this swing, whether it's like a dot that gets applied to the enemy, where it ticks down, does damage, and heals you for that damage. We'd have to wait and see. It might even be both, depending on the ability that you put it on, right? So something like Lacerate, it could be both, where it gives you heals you for 20% of the damage you do off the base hit, and then the bleed effect, the bleed effect would then heal you for the amount of damage it's doing, as in you're sitting there drinking the enemy's blood and healing yourself. I just got a visual of how that would actually look in an immersive way on the battlefield, that you're sitting there just slashing at the enemy, making it bleed, and it's just spurting blood out, and you're like, I'm sorry, that probably looked really, really gross. But that's how I pictured it, okay? I know, I messed up. What about putting a shield on yourself that when enemies hit it, they actually it reflects a bit of damage? Although that might actually fall, that's not really a manipulation of life, which is kind of how I see the life and death augments working. So maybe that would fall more under the leadership ability. Maybe a timer starts and you have to kill the character or dispel it before it ends or die. Like, a chance to add that effect. I presume you're running off of the chance to execute. I like that. And just for a little bit of salt, whatever damage it does, whatever that remaining HP is on the enemy, it heals you for that when they die. Now, it could be something super OP where, you could see a disease that has a similar type effect where it just does a decent amount of damage over time. But if it's dispelled, then the dispeller takes a significant chunk of damage. I'm thinking of kind of like the affliction ability that warlocks have in WoW, where it was introduced in TBC. It was a dot you would put on the enemy. It would tick for damage. If it was dispelled, the dispeller took a bunch of damage and was silenced for a period of time. Like, so it became a really, really powerful ability for warlocks to have. It was a top tier talent in the affliction tree. Heal blocks, I can see that as just preventing that flow of essence. Or what about even a heal redirect? Maybe a percent based. So you hit an enemy with XYZ ability, and you put a debuff on them that redirects, let's say, 50% of the healing received on that target to yourself. So if you're fighting an enemy and they've got a pocket healer, for example, and you put this debuff on, then 50% of the healing that they would have done, or your opponent only receives 50% of the healing from their pocket healer or from any other source, and you get the other 50%. Obviously, percentages need to be tuned and tested, but just to put a ballpark out there, that would be insane. That would be insane. There's some really cool possibilities here, I feel. What about a spread damage? Spread damage or spread death type ability. So you put a spread damage debuff. A lot of this is falling under the debuff thing as well. You put a spread damage on the enemy that any other enemies within a proximity of them take a percentage of the damage you do, like 20% of the damage you do. So it almost turns it into an AoE. It would turn that ability into an AoE. So let's say, imagine that on your weapon toss. Let's say, so weapon toss already will bounce between targets, as we see in the preview here. It bounces between targets. Now imagine adding a spread damage ability to that as well. So each hit that it does to one of those enemies, it spreads 20% of that damage to the other enemies in that area. So essentially, these enemies are each gonna take an extra 60% damage. 60? 40. An extra 40% damage, right? Because that back guy would take 20 from this guy, take 20 from that guy, and then the normal hit. So yeah, exploding corpses. Oh, we got a Diablo 3 player here. He played some Necromancer. I appreciate that. Exploding corpses. That has to be a thing. That has to be a thing. I mean, so they just, in the last few tests that we've done, when you're tab targeting, this was really noticeable in sieges. And when you killed somebody, their body lays on the floor for a period of time. When you're tab targeting, you could target those corpses. And now imagine that was a bug. They have since fixed that, to my understanding. I haven't tested since. But imagine being able to actually target those corpses and explode them. And just, that would be super cool. That would be super, super cool. So, man, yeah, I like that. I really, really like that. Could spread death and disease, could just do damage. Their skeleton could be like shrapnel. There's a number of ways that they could apply damage within a proximity of that. Or it could just be an AoE. You type as you if there's corpses on the ground, you cast an AoE, a template, and whatever corpses are in that area, boom, boom, boom. Imagine having that combined with the summoner when you raise an army of the dead and then all those dead die and become corpses, and then you can corpse explode everything. I know, pulling a lot from the Necromancer in D3, yes, but that could be insane. Raising corpses, things like that, I think would be really reserved for the summoner and what some of their innate abilities might be. Keep in mind, these are supposed to just augment other abilities. So, like, let's say the mage casts a meteor. Maybe after the meteor goes, anybody that's killed by it, boom, they get exploded. Or if there's already corpses under that template where the meteor's being cast, those corpses explode when it's cast, and could, you know, like stun targets in the area to hold them in place while that meteor comes down. So I could definitely see things like that. That would be super, super cool. And then Summoner's just got OP as fuck. Summoner Cleric, whatever that is, whatever that one is, just got OP. What is the Summoner and Cleric? Necromancer. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. A master of life and death. You can choose to be a necromancer for good or for dark and twisted things. Maybe. Okay, we might not have a ton of info on a lot of these yet. So something like, you know, the tank, I foresee getting a lot of self-healing out of their abilities. The Necromancer can go either way. Sorry, Paladin, I should say. We get a lot. Occultist, man. Occultist, I could see this either being, if they choose the path of the light, providing a lot of debuffs on your opponent that would allow your allies to heal themselves when doing damage. I can also see it being going down the path of death, just making it really deadly, putting a lot of diseases and poisons and just maybe taking out some of its critical, like, arteries or vital points. Could expose those vital points. I could see that totally being a thing. Soul Bow, I could definitely see it being as your arrow travels, it could heal any allies that it passes through. I could see some of your primary abilities now even being you target your allies and it heals them rather than targeting your enemy and doing damage. Yo, Daoist Gamer, how you doing? Good to see you. Miasma? Miasma? What's that? Same idea though. I can also see it for putting a lot of again, poisons and what's the word? Diseases on your opponent as well, making them very susceptible to taking further damage, preventing their healing that they're receiving, that kind of thing. From Cultist? In hidden doors, traps, and additional treasures. Ooh. So yeah, it just talks about the regular cleric stuff here. What else we got with the Acolyte? Maybe Soul Bow penetrates armor and magic defense. Totally. Like, and maybe not just for themselves, but they could also lower it for the group as well. Just totally reducing the damage mitigation that the opponent has by X% for a period of time. 100% I can see that being a debuff for some of the one or more of the Ranger's primary abilities. We'll know a little bit more, be able to speculate a bit more about it when we see the Ranger's abilities, hopefully in the near future. hopefully. I know the Ranger was going in for a redesign because it wasn't working quite the way they wanted it to, so. What do we got? We got the Acolyte, the Mage. Provide the Mage. I can see a lot of the Mage's AoE abilities adopting some of the Cleric's AoE abilities, where it provides a little bit of healing to your allies in the templates while still doing the damage to your opponents. I can also see that a lot of the damage is now maybe... I don't know if it would change the element, but it might add a corruption or a holy effect to it to do additional damage against certain types of enemies. I can absolutely see that being a thing. High Sword, man. The self-healing that the High Sword is going to have. Holy crap. It feels like it could be a strong thing. This thing that could just move around the battlefield, hit like a truck. Yo, Truth, how you doing? Good to see you. Man, like this thing could be an absolute beast in small form combat, like 1v1, 2v2 arenas, in just out soloing in the world. I can see the High Sword being one of the just strongest, most efficient killers with a reasonable amount of self-sustain. Maybe even more than reasonable. We'll have to see. As far as a death augment, or what else were we talking about here? Buff augments, debuffs, resource manipulation. The Soul Bow I can very much see having some resource draining type abilities as well. Absolutely. Or even giving a little bit of regen to allies potentially too. Or allies that are in proximity to the enemy, as in you hit the opponent with a holy shot, let's say, and now any ally within that area is going to get a little bit of health regen while that arrow sits there in the target for a period of time, or even permanently, because unless the enemy can pull the arrow out and it doesn't just disintegrate. But yeah, I can see the High Sword absolutely having some huge buff, debuff type ability, augments to its abilities. Then again, we have no idea what the hell the fighter's going to have. High Priest just enhances everything that the Cleric already does. Just turn it up to 11. The Soul Weaver, I can see the Soul Weaver actually maybe even taking the role of a primary healer in a group that is semi-proficient in the content already. Because the Bard will offer healing, but not to the same effectiveness of a Cleric. But a Soul Weaver with some life augments might really boost that healing. You know, we might just simply see an increases innate healing. When I say innate, I mean the primary abilities healing by a percent. So you get an extra 20% healing on all your heals as the Soul Weaver. Okay, well now you just got 20% more effective as a healer, and maybe your heals are now strong enough to be a primary healer in your group and still be able to provide a bunch of buffs and the other things that the Bard is hopefully going to be bringing to the table. So, depending, like, I know Steven said in that interview that we watched that you're never going to replace the Cleric in your group with a Bard. You know, that but at some point, depending on the content you're doing, like if you're talking about the ultimate end game content, the highest tier of raids or legendary world bosses, sure, I could see that being the truth. But anything less than that, that's going to be very much gear dependent and the competency of your group. You know, how many times have we watched those really, really hardcore players go into raid content and way under geared, way under leveled, whatever it might be, and be able to beat it because they're coordinated, they're all on the same page, they all know the mechanics, and they all work the mechanics properly, when you do the fight the way it's intended to be done, with a competent group, you can go in there and do it. It takes a lot more focus, a lot more patience, but it can be done. So bards are famous for buffs more than heal. Yes, absolutely. But at the same time, you don't want the bard to just be a buff bot either. The big thing about the bard is it's going to be very proximity based. So it will cast an AoE for a lot of its buffs, its heals, but that AoE is going to be centered to your character, to the bard. So you actually have to have proper positioning on the battlefield to apply the buffs or heals that you would need to apply. That's going to be one aspect of the bard that's going to make you have to still be paying attention and engaged in the encounter, is the mobility aspect. But they've talked, and recently in the AMA, more about trying to make the bard a very viable character in the party. It's not just you cast your buffs and then you go sit on the sidelines and wait until those buffs are about to expire, and then you come back and do it again. So I really like the idea of, you want the bard to make sure that that person feels like they are a part of that battle, that encounter, for the duration of the encounter, and that their presence there is more than just essentially providing what consumables can't. The templates are interesting. The AoE templates are one thing that's something we're all very familiar with casting AoEs. Is you pretty much, you press the button, you get a template, you put it on the ground somewhere, and your AoE ability gets cast there. But the bard is going to be, you don't get to point and click where you choose to cast it. You have to run to where you want it to be effective. I hope that these abilities aren't channeled, right? Like whether you're playing a song, that you can just, you play your song, it's got a cast time that you get the song started, and then it just plays so that you can continue to do other things. And you're probably going to see the bard offer buffs in a way that they can offer the song buffs. Should only be able to play one at a time, and maybe it lasts for 2 minutes. And all of the songs go on a global cooldown of like 1 minute. So you now have to wait that minute. Then you can cast another song to play to bring up different buffs for your party, but it stops the previous one. And it won't stack with another bard in proximity doing the same thing. So if you're both doing a rally cry that's increasing your attack power and your health a little bit for you and your party mates, if two of you are together, you're not getting a combined effect. You're still only getting one. So that placement and positioning in the encounter becomes that much more important for however many bards you're bringing, if you want to provide appropriate buffs to the group. It's going to make for a lot more communication and strategizing in how you go into your encounters. But it's something that if you're with a pretty familiar group, you know, if you're running with the same 8 folks or the same 40 folks, give or take, on a regular basis, you can be like, okay, you guys, you're all part of this group A, you're part of group B, you're part of group C, and you're in those groups for a variety of reasons, but positioning being a big one of them. And you have a bard that's assigned to be with you in that group, and they can provide that supplemental healing, they can provide those buffs that help benefit those types of classes. Anyways, any other thoughts of what we might see? Maybe you know, these 3 schools are all speculatory. This one is a stretch, like I said. I think I can very much see these 2 actually being the other 2 schools for the cleric. But any other thoughts on that one? My brain's turning to mush now. I'm all out of ideas. I've tried nothing and I'm all out of ideas. I'm excited. I feel like the cleric secondary is going to be a very sought after secondary for a lot of people, especially for solo players that are looking for that little bit of extra self-sustain. I see the Cleric being kind of the flavor of choice there, or the Bard. The Bard might be a very, very popular secondary as well. Depending on how powerful buffs are in the game, I can see the Bard being very, very, very powerful. You're aiming for Necromancer. If the Necromancer sounds like probably one of the coolest classes to me. Like, just I don't know that that there is even a life or a light option when augmenting your Necromancer. I feel like you have to go the death route. Just raising those armies of the dead, that just seems... It seems way, way too exciting to me. Like I said at the top of the show, I really, really want to see... I don't care if that army of skeletons only does like if each skeleton only does 1 damage. I want to see 100 of them when you spawn that, and they all just go and like just surround and swarm something. Like, that would be so cool. It doesn't have to do a lot of damage. It just needs to be intense and intimidating. Cleric Bard, that would be a Scryer. That would, like, I think you would become the most powerful support class in the game with that. But you would have you would be second in just straight up healing power to the High Priest, but you would offer so much extra support to the group from just the extra buffs that you're going to provide. Like, maybe now your heals also provide buffs to your allies, whether that they are single target or AoE or based on centered around you, and just everybody around you kind of takes effect from that. Having those extra buffs could more than account for the extra healing you would get as a High Priest, especially if there's mitigation buffs in there. You could easily make up for that. And that would scale even better with your group's gear, I would think. Those mitigation buffs, until you hit a point of diminishing returns in your mitigation anyway, are going to be more powerful than heals. You know, damage prevented is mana saved. I'm going for the death route. Undead units have been my preference. I don't know why, because they just look cool and badass, and the fact that you can swarm your enemies with an army of the undead, like, yes please. Maybe because they oppose death by not dying. I can see that being a very, very hard thing to kill, especially... Oh, like, I didn't think of this previously, but if they keep player collision and NPC collision in the game the way it is right now, even when they add momentum to it, having an army of the undead, even if it's only for 30 seconds... That could be 30 seconds where the enemy cannot get through to you. They can't cast abilities at you unless it's an AoE type thing that comes from the ground. You could block an entire doorway or gateway in a castle siege to buy your allies a moment of time to regroup, to block the enemy from getting through. And let's not forget. In the castle sieges, I don't know if it'll be for all 40-man raids, but in the castle sieges, if you put 8 of the same primary archetype in a group together, one of them can initiate a group ability that all 8 of you combined can contribute to have a superpowered ability, such as summoning, I don't know, a giant skeleton or zombie or golem, undead Frankenstein creature that's bigger than the castle walls to go and wreak havoc. Essentially, almost like, I'm probably close to raid boss status. Well, maybe not quite that strong, but... Now, all 8 archetypes are going to have a unique ability like that, but that's not in the game yet. So when we do get a chance to see that and test that, holy crap. Could you imagine? Could you imagine a group of 8 necromancers just summoning a giant undead or a giant army of the undead? Maybe that's why they need to push for 500 versus 500, because of all the all of the army of undeads that are going to be summoned. Could be summoned at once. You could crash a server with that. 5,000 bears, what? Yeah, I think it's a golem, that's right. It's based off your primary archetype, not the secondary. But yeah, you summon that giant golem as a group, and then a few of you summon armies of the undead afterwards. Like, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be chaotic. And thinking about that right now, we've got a long ways to go on the server performance side of things before we're ready for something like that. Because that's a very real possibility. Even in 100 versus 100, you could have a pretty large number of necromancers in there that all summon armies. And what if they all summon armies at the same time? Unlikely that all of them will, but to think that in a group of 200 people that you might not see 5 to 10 armies in and around the same time would be crazy. So we need performance to be in a position to handle that. That's a big one. That's a big one. So yeah, I don't know too much more about what the cleric will have to offer here in terms of schools, how those may interact with the existing primary abilities. Okay, we'll be able to, then it might work. That's, yeah, 10k active concurrent players on a server, I think is what they're going for. Now, I don't know about all active online at the same time, but I think they were looking to have like 10,000 accounts per server or something like that, or 15,000 accounts per server. I'd have to double check, but clerics will be in short supply in military nodes. That's a good question. As solo players, yes. In guilds, no. 50k accounts, 10k concurrent online. Okay. Yo, Bubba, how you doing? Good to see you. Yeah, that's a lot. 10k on as active on the server at any given time is hefty. That's a big number. So yeah, if they can get that, then they should be okay. Playing some Minecraft? Nice. Right on. I've been really digging the building and whatnot in Valheim, so it makes me a little bit more intrigued about Minecraft. You might have to get it for the PlayStation. I know the kiddos would love it. But yeah, I can see it. To me, that question boils more down to: are you going to see the more PvP focused players rolling clerics as a primary archetype? And honestly, in their current state, I can see them doing that. But things are likely to change. Plus, we got a lot of other classes to be introduced. We already know that class balancing isn't going to be a big thing, right? Like in terms of 1v1, 2v2 PvP, class balancing isn't going to be there. It's going to be, class balancing is based on the 8 primary archetypes in a group of 8. So a group of 1 each, traveler, essentially. Yo, thank you for the follow, Baba. I appreciate that. Waiting for the Hearth and Home update on Valheim before going back. I'm excited for that one. I still got it down the 5th boss, so I'm still playing that one. My buddy Sir Selmy has been working hard on building our new house, and it's massive, and he's done a good portion of it now, from my understanding. I think he's playing right now, actually. When am I going to join Axiom? Probably pretty soon. I will. I've been really enjoying hanging with you guys. So, yeah, I love the no drama. Axiom represent. I don't know where all the virtue folks are today. Usually they're in here too, but yeah. But yeah, so I think based on the current gameplay, I think you will see a lot of PvP players running clerics. They are very strong. Tanks are the kind of the kings of PvP right now, but we also know they are way overtuned. And once we see diminishing returns come into play for CC, I think tanks are gonna take a bit of a step down to fall in line with where the clerics are, and the cleric's ability to sustain. If the cleric can survive the tank's mana pool, the cleric wins. Every single time the cleric wins if they can survive the mana pool. That's all it is. And I think they will be able to do that. So we'll have to wait and see. We only know level 1 to 10, but I don't think they're, based on what I've seen right now in the game, no, I don't think we'll see short supply of clerics in military nodes. That'll just be military nodes, aside from guilds that choose to inhabit them as a guild. Any other players in there are probably going to be semi PvP focused players, and you're going to see some of the stronger PvP classes in there. If anything, I can see bards being in very short supply in military nodes. Very, very short supply. Outside of your guild, probably not going to see many. But that's just because I don't think the bard is going to be a very strong PvPer. I think they're going to get annihilated by a lot of things. Get your first V-shot. Nice. I'm still waiting to get approval or get my scheduling for when I can book my second vaccine, but augments will be pretty major choices and affectability drastically rather than being closer to cosmetic. I'm kind of in between. Truth. They're definitely going to be far more than just cosmetic. I think they're not going to like completely change what the ability does, but they are going to influence and change it enough that the choice is going to matter for your play style and what you're trying to achieve. You know, whether like let's take the Scion for example. I'm going to speak to the Scion for a minute here because it's currently the one on my radar for my primary class. When you combine the Scion with, let's say, the Frost School of Augment, now you're giving your abilities an innate chance to apply a freezing effect or a slow. And that's just something that is going to happen passively when you're using those abilities the way you normally would anyway. So your kiting potential becomes insanely powerful. That's going to be really strong, in my opinion, in small format PvP. So in your arenas, in the open world, for soloing things, anytime you need to kite something, that's going to be really, really strong. But let's say you augment it now with the Fire or Lightning School of Augment, where it adds a burning effect or an electrocute effect, so maybe a stun. Let's focus on the Fire one. So it adds a burning effect. I can see that being far stronger in group PvE combat, because now you're just doing more damage. You're just expediting the damage, and you have no need to kite things. So the Frost won't be anywhere near as effective. So I very much think that depending on your playstyle, your area of focus, that yes, augments will absolutely matter. And they will be very influential to how your class plays. But I don't think that it's going to replace another class. So a bard with a cleric augment is not going to replace a straight up cleric in your group as a primary healer, for example. At least that's not the intent or goal. But will a tank and cleric actually add a heal to your tank ability? I think it'll add some measure of self-healing if you choose to go down the life augment school. I think it'll add an element of self-healing. Will it be enough that you can go in and main tank a raid boss without having a dedicated healer? No. Will it ease that healer and maybe they can come in with a little bit less gear or be able to maybe also provide a little bit of party healing because you don't need as much? Yes. That's where I think it's going to land. I also think I think the self-healing you're going to see a lot more in effectiveness outside of group combat. But you know, at the same time, you could choose to go down the death tree and maybe you apply debuffs to your enemy as a tank that increases the damage it takes from you and from other sources. It could apply diseases and dots that also reduces its effectiveness to do damage to you. Ranger Mage seems like a good combo. I theory crafting, I think it's going to be very strong in a lot of areas, and that's, you know, I do, as much as I want to go in and do a lot of treasure hunting and be out on the open seas, I also want to have a place in the arenas, and I want to do some small format PvP, just kind of in my downtime or as something that I stream, and it could be a lot of fun. You know, Bartik put out a video yesterday, you guys, if you haven't seen it already, go check it out, especially if content creation is something on your radar for Ashes of Creation. And yeah, he brought up some very, very good points about live streaming this game. And, you know, you might choose to be a little more limited, and I can see doing arenas being one of those things. You know, you put it on even a 1 minute delay, and you know, you can go in and do something like that that's a queued event within the node, and be able to do it without being, you know, stream sniped and ganked for all your loot that you just went and farmed for hours, you know. So that could be one of those things that people do. Most likely, after all, it's a paladin. Yeah, it's gonna be strong. But at the same time, like, you as a paladin, you can choose to go down the light path for self-healing, but you can also choose to go down one of the other 3 schools of augment. The only other one we know of is death. The rest of these are speculative at best, of being able to buff self and allies or being able to manipulate resources. This was more of an out of combat type school of augment that maybe the cleric will provide, but this one's a stretch. So you could actually be a dark paladin, a death knight, if you will. I don't know if a death knight is actually a thing in here. Let's do our handy dandy Control F. Control F. Yeah, no death knight. There's nothing even with death, let alone knight. Maybe if not adding a heal ability, increasing healing received by others or reducing their healing. Absolutely. We talked a little bit about a healing block or even a healing redirect. So if the boss has a healer, maybe you put a healing redirect. If you have a healing redirect augment on, that it applies that debuff, and a percentage of the healing it would do to itself, you now receive, or your party now receives. And before High Priest meta. That's now we did see it in one of the things we watched to try to learn a little bit more about what the cleric augments are going to be. But a question that led into that was, will the where is it here? Sorry. Will the Guardian be the ultimate tank and make all other tank secondaries laughable? Or will all of them be able to handle top tier end game raid content? And the goal from Intrepid is, the vision from Steven, is that all of these types of tanks will be totally viable of main tanking end game raid bosses, end game content. So the Guardian isn't going to be the only tank that you can choose. Now, so extrapolating that idea, I would expect that the cleric falls in the same thing, that the High Priest, sure, it might be the best pure healer in the game, but it is not going to, if you choose any of these other clerics, it's not going to, they're not going to be laughable. They could still be that main healer in your raid. So, and I would expect that to follow suit for any of the primary archetypes or any of the classes. That your primary stance is going to be not overtaken by somebody else. You will always be very effective at what you do. There might be just in this encounter, this flavor is preferred over that one. You know, I used the example of the frost augment for the Scion earlier being primarily PvP focused, but what if you're fighting the fire dragon? You know, you're not going to want to have the fire Scion there. You're going to want to have the frost Scion. Whereas if you're fighting the frost dragon, going to be the opposite, right? So because those elemental effects will impact your damage. And who knows, maybe casting fire abilities on the fire dragon will actually heal it if it doesn't do just very minimal damage. I saw that. Don't stream after you loot epic mats or gear. Pretty much. And that's a very, very good point. That's a very good point, because there's ever the opportunist. Just roll in there and be like, hey, yeah, I just saw you did 4 hours of raiding and came out with a bunch of gear. Now our group's going to come wipe your group and hopefully be able to take a bunch of stuff. Now, that being said, if you're not corrupted yourself, you're only going to drop materials. Raw materials. Processed goods, finished goods, not going to be dropped. So if you looted a bunch of epic gear and loot and just some generic mats, not a big deal. It's not as bad. You're going to suffer experience debt. Then again, we don't know what experience debt is going to look like at level 50, at max level. What happens to that portion of the death penalty? Not too sure. I think we asked Steven that in the last live stream, but I think if I remember correctly, he was very, very rushed for time at that point and didn't really give us a good answer. That, at least not one that really answered that question. So might be something to propose at a later time. I hope there's a choice for dark side for Paladin. Oh, there will be. There will be. Every secondary is supposed to offer 4 schools of augment that you can choose from. My question for this coming live stream is, will that choice of 4 schools of augment be unique for every primary ability, or once you pick one, do you now have to stay in that school for the rest of your primary abilities? Right? So if you're going to go Paladin, for example, and you choose to go life on one ability, do you now have to choose life as your school for all abilities, or can you go death on other abilities and kind of mix match that way? I expect that you can mix match, but maybe not. Maybe there'll be a little bit more of a decision to be made there than just on a skill by skill basis, because now it's like, hey, this skill would be really, really cool to have a bit of self-healing on, but at the same time, on the other ability, I really want to have the death augment on it, and I can only have one school. I can't have both. So which one am I going to go with? Which one's am I going to stick with, you know? Close stream window when you actually loot. I mean, you could, but if you're in there raiding and you kill something, people are going to know that you're going to have something on you, and just that much alone might be enough to incentivize folks to come hunt for you. And if you're in there for a long time, like Bard said, even if you have a 1 hour delay, that's enough time, if people know roughly where that is on the map and they're on your server, that they could move their forces there and be waiting, or even come into the dungeon and get you. Like, not showing your loot is like leaving your car doors unlocked in the parking lot and putting your wallet in the glove box instead of leaving it on the seat. It keeps the honest people honest, and they're not going to look. I mean, somebody that wouldn't normally break into a car, you look in and they see your wallet sitting on the seat. Maybe they're having a rough time in their life right now. Maybe that's like, hey, this is an opportunity. They flick the door handle. Oh, it's open? Cool. Mine. Whereas if the door's locked, they'll test it. Door's locked. Okay, cool. They carry on their way. Not going to break into the car. Fuck that. If that wallet's in the glove box, you're not even going to check to see if the door's open or not, right? So I can kind of see in that scenario where you hide what the loot drops are, who loots those items, right? Because maybe the streamer doesn't loot those items. Maybe it's somebody else in the raid that loots those items. So that might make it to be like, okay, you know what? Maybe it's not worth getting corrupted for. Maybe it's not worth having that reputation on the server for, and that therefore being hunted by a lot of other people, or being on a bit of a KOS list for a lot of other groups or guilds. 1 hour delay or any delay removes the interaction bonus Twitch provides. That's the other aspect. The whole point of live streaming is audience interaction, at least to me. Right? If you're not, sure, if you're as big as Asmongold and your chat's moving so fast that you can't read 99% of what's being said by your chat because it's just moving too fast, that's one thing. But you still you're still glancing and seeing what's there. You might not respond to everything, but you're still glancing. You see the general idea of what chat's saying, and you can pick and choose to respond to certain things. Whereas if you're on a large delay, what's the point? Why not just record it and put it on YouTube? Right? And that was kind of what the video was talking about, was a lot of that stuff might be better suited to be recorded and put up on YouTube after the fact than live streamed. And live streaming is going to be a lot more focused on in-game events and activities that don't involve running around like that, as well as like the arenas, things like that, curated events, or just running around doing stuff with the community, with the group, or doing offline stuff like podcasts and discussions and talk shows and whatever else. I can see a lot of offline content being live streamed for Ashes very successfully. Would work on TikTok. Like, are you talking about in-game footage on TikTok? I'm not a huge TikToker myself. I go on every now and then with the kiddos to look at stuff and just have a laugh. But depending on someone's creativeness, absolutely, I think it could be viable and entertaining. It depends on the creativeness and how that person is poising the content, whether they're doing something IRL or in-game. Have your stream, turn on the sniper and call them out publicly. You'll need several people following you live, but we could protect you. Well, and that's absolutely a thing. A larger community is going to be a lot more daunting to attack than a small community. You know, a small streamer like myself, if I've got just a handful of people in my community versus someone who's got 40, 50, 60,000 people in their community at any given time, more than a server's population even, they're going to be a lot less likely to get attacked. At the same time, there's the 15 minutes of fame aspect, or 5 minutes of fame, of being able to hunt that person and take them down. In WoW, Asmongold gets killed all the time on a PvP server, but there's no penalty to the people. There's also no gain other than the 5 minutes of fame, but there's no penalty to it, right? Whereas in Ashes, that player's going to go corrupt when they do that. And now they're going to have a chance to drop their gear. And so when the rest of that community who's around comes in and kills them after that, because now they are flagged, that's going to be very discouraging. No, I don't want to be on a large streamer servers. I don't think anybody does. Unless you're a member of that streamer's community and you want to try to play with them. I don't think many people want to be on a larger streamer server. I think out of all the larger streamers, I think Asmon would probably be one of the safer ones. The other aspect of that being that a lot of those other large streamers might not stick around in Ashes for a long period of time. They might up and leave after a little while, and if a bunch of their community goes with them, then yeah, you've got the server death aspect of it to deal with, and that's no good. The last thing I want is to be on a server that starts to die and has to get merged with another server. That would suck. Because now you're the outsiders. Now you're the new kid in town. You're going to get bullied. You're going to get picked on. And where that server is at compared to where your server was at, in terms of node development and progression, is most likely going to be vastly different. the later into the game we get, anyway, the more likely that'll be. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this was a really good chat. I think we came up with some really cool ideas here. I think we came up with some really, really cool ideas about what we might see come from the cleric in terms of the additional schools of augmentation and how some of those schools might influence other abilities. The life one is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to provide healing in some way, shape, or form, whether it's to you or your allies or both. That's pretty much what it's going to be. Death, on the other hand, I think can be a little bit more complex. It can give you manipulation over the dead in the case of the summoner. It will likely influence the amount of damage your opponents take, whether that's in the form of buffs or debuffs. We'll have to see. It could impact healing in a negative way for your opponents. A chance to execute a death timer, that would be neat. Really cool. Lifesteal, a spread damage, just the ability to spread death out more. I can absolutely see being a thing. The leadership, where it provides buffs, self buffs, shields, damage reflections. Yo, Z, how you doing? Welcome. Good to see you. So I can very much see this also being a thing. I think that we're going to see the buff school of augment already. We talked about it being on the tank last week. Obviously, it's going to be one of the main things for the bard as a secondary school. So maybe not will that be part of the cleric, but it's a very good possibility. I am doing very well. Thank you. How are you? Resource manipulation. It's part of the cleric's innate skill set a little bit, with at least with castigation it is. So I can very much see this being a thing where you have the ability to increase yourself or your allies' regen of resources. Not of health, because that would fall under the life school, but definitely of your mana pool or whatever other resources might get introduced to the game. Yeah, no. The ability to drain opponents' resources. Maybe not absorb them. Well, absorb them could be a thing, but that would also be a lesser effect, I would expect. But like a mana drain type ability that could go up as part, like when you strike an enemy, it just sucks X amount of mana out of that person's pool or your opponent's pool. Or maybe it puts as part of like a bleed or a burn or another dot that comes from your ability, it also drains mana. Or it changes it, instead of doing damage, it drains mana. That would be super, super effective. I have my Twitch at random size so I can monitor Discord. Fair enough. That context is key, right? Yo, Brown Race, what's going on? How you doing? Good to see you, friend. Good to see you. Absorb mana. Absorb mana. That would be really cool. Absorbing resources. I can absolutely see that become a thing, especially for something like the soul bow, being able to drain the resources from an arrow stuck in the target. You know, if you have like a heart shot or something like that, might drain life. If you have, say, a headshot with it, maybe that one sticks there and does a bit of mana drain over time, and your allies in the proximity of that and yourself could drain some of that and absorb some of that mana for yourself. Yo, Brown Race with the resub. 5 months, my guy. Hey, thank you. I appreciate that. Just lurk life and gathering info for me if you don't mind. Hey, absolutely. Gather the info. This discussion will be going up on YouTube for next week. This week's video is going to be our discussion from last week about the tank schools of augment. So we'll be throwing that one up. I still have to kind of cut it up a bit, clean it up so it takes out a lot of the dead air and ramblings that I do, because I ramble a lot, I know. And the those drive me nuts. So I try to cut those out as much as possible. That'll be going up on the channel for this week's video. Also, while I've got you guys all here, I've been doing a lot of thinking about it. I talked to Bard a bit about it on Monday's stream, and I've been thinking more about it. I've got a new YouTube channel up. I haven't put any videos on it yet, and I probably won't for another couple weeks while I kind of get a few other things set up and in line. But my current YouTube channel, you guys, I used to use it for another game and other content. And from the research I've done and the people I've talked to, that can really screw up your place in the algorithm. And the channel is nowhere near so big that I can't just move everything over. So all of my Ashes content will be coming off of the Half Tilt Gamer YouTube channel in time and will be reposted if the content is still accurate and relevant to the new channel. The new channel is going to be called Tilted Paradise. I've already got it, so the name is good. But that will be launched officially in the future. It's there now. If you guys want to go drop a sub to it ahead of time, by all means. And then it'll likely get spammed with a whole bunch of videos from all the backlog of stuff as I transfer everything over. So let me grab a link for it here. But like I say, it's going to be a bit of time before that channel kind of takes over. For now, I'm going to post, I don't know, maybe I'll post the new video to both. We'll have to see. But for now, Half Tilt Gamer is still going to be the channel. So this one will be coming up though. And that's it. It's simply because I'm pretty sure that the old channel the algorithm is all messed up on it and it's annoying the crap out of me. So we're going to make the move. I'm in the process right now of finding an artist on Fiverr. We're going to get a proper new intro and outro made for videos moving forward. And, you know, after the whole DMCA fiasco with my old logo and all that shit, we've got a new logo. I love it. It's amazing. Lady Tilt here behind me, she designed it, did an absolutely amazing job. Wouldn't leadership be more of a Bard thing? Very, very possible, yes. Very, very possible. This is 100% speculation. These three categories are 100% speculation. Peep Heights, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. But absolutely buffs and debuffs, that type of thing, 100% falls more into the Bard category. But that doesn't mean that other classes are going to have forms of buffs and debuffs that they provide, just maybe not on the same granular scale or to the same effectiveness as the Bard. So we'll have to see. The only two schools we know of for the Cleric is Life and Death. Those two schools cover a lot of components of how something can interact with your primary abilities. So we're looking at a couple other, we looked at some out of combat type augments as well as a couple of other things that don't really fall under the life or death tree and tried to go with something there. So that's kind of where we landed. But if you've got other ideas, I would love to hear them. That's what this is all about. That's what this is all about. But that being said, you might have to wait until the video goes up on YouTube next week, because I am calling her a day here, you guys. It's been fun, but I need to turn on a fan. This room is way too fucking hot now. And I can't have the fan on when I'm streaming, otherwise that's all you're going to hear.